Hello everyone, and welcome to our MOA Kids activity for Monday, April 27th. Today is April 27th. Hope everyone had a great weekend, and we're going to start off this week with a drawing. And we're going to talk about the maize, beans, and squash, which are the plants that the indigenous people who were living in the village that the Lawson site is made of, or living in the village that is now the Lawson site, were farmers. So they were growing crops, and they were growing crops in huge amounts. So there were fields many walks away from the village, or many days walks away from the village, because there were roughly about 1,500 to 2,000 people. And to feed that many people on a regular basis, you need a lot of food. And the food that they were growing was 3 crops in particular, and they planted them all together. So these are called the maize, beans, and squash. And we have lots of evidence archaeologically for maize and beans, and a little less for squash. But traditional knowledge is that the squash was there as well. And these 3 plants, they were brought north from South America. So they are not an original indigenous plant to Ontario, but around about 1,000 years ago, they're here and they're being planted in a large amount. So we're gonna go through by drawing to learn about, it's Monday morning. We're going to learn how these plants were grown in the fields around the village that's adjacent to the museum, and how they were planted, because the way they were planted is what helped them grow. So I'm going to tilt us down so we can see my page here, and I'm going to take us through the drawing step by step, and we'll learn about the maize, beans, and squash, also known as corn, beans, and squash. Maize being a slightly older, more original form of the plant. So corn is much adapted by people and changed. So we're going to tilt ourselves down here so we can see my screen, see my my sheet here. Okay, I'm being the forward. So I have a number of markers today. You can use pencil crayons, you can use crayons, you can use markers, you can use paint if you want to. But we're gonna start with a brown one. And to start with the brown one, what we wanna do is draw a little mound of dirt by just making a little curving line at the bottom of our page. And this is a mound of soil that we're gonna plant our seeds in. And the first seed that we're going to use is going to be maize, and it's going to be green, or it's going to be yellow. So our drawing today is going to be a little bit of an abstract drawing, in that all of our maize plant is going to be yellow, all of our bean plant is going to be green, and all of our squash plant is going to be orange. Now in real life, that's not quite how it is. Maize plant is only yellow in the kernels of the corn or of the maize. And even then, in the past, it wasn't necessarily that. Maize could be brown, it could be red, it could be orange. There was a lot of variety of colors. But for today's purposes, so we know which is which, we're gonna use yellow. So we're gonna start with our yellow crayon, or a yellow marker, or a yellow pencil crayon, and we're gonna draw in some little yellow seeds. You can do as many or as few as you would like, all underneath that line of soil that we drew. So these are our maize seeds, and they are in the ground, and along with them, we're gonna plant some green bean seeds. So we're gonna plant those right next to our maize seeds. So now our bean seeds are in the ground. We're going to use an orange marker to plant our squash. And our squash seeds are going to be orange today. So these are the colors representing the final the final plant, the final food that we eat. All right, now, in order for these plants to grow, they need a couple of things. So the first thing that they need is we need our yellow marker again because they need some sun. So we're gonna draw up in the corner a sun. You can give it a smiley face if you want. And that sun is going to shine down on our seeds that are planted in the ground, and they're gonna help it, it's gonna help it to grow. There also needs to be some water. Our plant seeds need water. So we're gonna draw just a little bit of rain coming down. We'll put a little bit down here too. That's to represent that rain and the water that is going to help these plants to grow. We might add some more later on, we'll see. Now, these plants were planted all together underneath in the soil, in these little mounds. Farmers today, they don't plant the crops all together like this. They plant one crop at a time. And they grow big fields of corn or big fields of peas or beans or wheat or whatever is being grown. This method is actually going to help them to grow when we have less modern farming techniques. So we have our yellow marker and our corn stalks. They're big and tall, and we'll just put that to the side. These are going to grow about halfway up our page. They're just starting to grow. Maize stalks will eventually be big and tall, but to start off with, they're just starting out. And we'll use our green marker to start our beans in their growth. So beans grow on vines, and vines are very much helped by something to grow on. If you have nothing there, then the beans or the vines will kind of grow on the ground, but they don't do very well. So the corn stalk or the maize stalk is going to provide our bean vine with a very great place to grow. So we're going to take our green marker and I'm going to draw just a swirling green line from our seed around our corn stalk or our maize stalk. And we'll do that around all of them. There's our beans starting to grow. And our squash, there's a lot of varieties of squash. One of them is pumpkin. Most squash, all squash, are heavy. They sit on the ground. They have big leaves that spread out, but they don't go very tall. So we're just gonna draw some little sprouts of our squash plants here, and we're gonna scribble some of these orange for the leaves of these squash that are starting to spread out along the top. Now it's said that these squash will help keep the water in the ground, at least somewhat. Probably not perfectly. Okay, so now that our beans are supporting our corn stalks, they're giving them strength and stability. Our corn stalks can now grow as tall as they want up towards the sun. So we're going to continue these corn stalks as tall as we want them to be. And they can begin to provide us with some food. So we're going to draw some corn, little corn cobs growing off of these stalks. Now I like to do these with, very simply, we need a V shape off of our corn, and then an upside down V. You see how that? And then some little lines in it like that. And I'll do that in black so you guys can see that a little bit better up here in the corner. So we want a V shape, an upside down V, and then some little lines inside. know if we can see that. Hopefully we can. I've got a weird angle that I'm watching you guys on. Okay, so we put a few more of those on, as many as you would like. You can be really careful or you can be really quick. It's up to you. A couple on each one. You could also be much more realistic in your drawing if you would like to. But just want to show our corn cobs are there. And now that our corn stalks, our maize stalks have grown tall, our beans can grow with them. Our beans will grow and cover the surface that they have. So they're going to continue all the way up, growing taller, and by growing taller they can produce more beans. So what's happening is that these plants are helping each other to grow, and they're helping each other grow bigger and produce more food than they would have if they were growing on their own. So now we need to add in some beans. Now beans are really easy to draw. We just do some little curvy lines. I don't even know what to call them. They're not really a shape. They're little curvy lines. All off of our corn, or all off of our bean vines on our corn stalks, on our maize stalks. Draw as many or as few as you like. There we go. So there's our maize and our beans, and we need our squash. So now what's happening here is that all of these plants, our maize and our beans, are filling in this space, and they're protecting the ground somewhat from sun's rays that are shining down on it. And the squash prefer a little bit less sun. So those are helping the squash not be too hot in the sun, and they can grow, and we'll make ours into some pumpkins. You can make whatever shape you want. So we have some, a forward C, a backward C. I'm not sure which way you're seeing, but we have one each way, and a little top. So we can do that for each of our little squash shoots here. Some little lines in the middle to show those ridges that you find on pumpkins. There we go. There we are. So there we have some pumpkins, and let's expand by scribbling in all of that squash leaves that we see down there at the bottom, protecting that soil, helping anyway, not 100%, but helping keep that water in the ground. So we'll add some more dots of water that is being kept in the soil, helping the plants to grow by providing them with water. There we go. A little more rain. Awesome. So that is our drawing of corn, beans, and squash. And as always, you should sign your artwork. Can I do this upside down? I don't know what it'll look like. It'll be backwards, but there we go. I'm gonna pop us back up. There we are. Do we have a garden at the museum that we plant corn, beans, and squash in? We have tried. So what happens, I'm gonna hold this up here. So what happens is our ground is within the village is not great. It doesn't grow plants very, very well today. Maybe it did 500 years ago, but it doesn't now. So we've tried, we've managed to grow a little bit of squash. Deer eat the corn. That was probably a problem in the past too for people who are growing the corn, beans, and squash, or the maize, beans, and squash in this area. They would have been keeping an eye out for those animals that were eating their crops, as farmers have to do today. And they probably would have hunted those animals for food when they came by to eat their food. So, but what happens, and So I guess the short answer to that is not really, but we have tried. So what happens is once these plants grow in the ground, they're taking nutrients out of the soil. And people often ask us, why did the people who lived on our village site, where did they go? Or why did they leave? We think they went east towards what's now the sort of Brantford, Hamilton, Niagara region. Not 100% sure about that. But we know why they left, most likely. And that is because the plants that they were growing, the farmland that they were using, stopped producing food in the way that it had before. And that's what happens when you're planting crops in the ground for year after year after year after year. And the soil is losing the nutrients by giving it to the plants. And these three plants together, particularly the beans and the maize, the beans and the corn, they help replenish some of those nutrients that are being used. So the beans give nitrogen to the soil, the maize takes it out. So they're helping keep that soil healthy as they're growing, but it doesn't last forever. So about 20, 25 years, and then the soil would have stopped producing the crops that they needed, and they would have moved up to a new location. Also, their longhouses at that point would have started to be much like ours are. So sort of the life cycle of the village was about 20 to 25 years. So thank you everybody for drawing with me today. And again, if you make a drawing of your own, please share it with us at hashtag MOA Kids Activities on any of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are on all of those. And we look forward to seeing them, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Heather will be with you tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. And on Wednesday, we will be talking about some frogs that are in the Medway Valley area. So I will see you then. Bye-bye.